Hello, welcome everyone to our today's webinar about scaling video production. Today we have a pleasure to learn from David Hice, Senior Director of Photography Production at Aritzia. I'm Alexandra and I'm Experience Marketing Lead here at Pixels, and I will be your host for today, the moderator of our conversation. Also, I will be keeping an eye on the chat just in case you have any technical issues. Drop a note there and I'll make sure that someone contacts you. Before I invite David here on stage, I would like to go over some housekeeping rules. As you can already see, and I see some of you have already discovered, we have a chat on the right-hand side, and you're welcome to add any comments, questions, GIFs or GIFs, depending on how you pronounce them, emojis, as we go with the conversation. We definitely want to make sure that we have an engaging webinar and that you get your questions answered. So you can ask your questions, of course, in the chat, but the best way to submit your question is using the Q&A function. On the top of the chat box, you can see there are different tabs: chat, poll, docs, Q&A. So go to the Q&A section. If you have a question, type it in there and submit. This way, we're not going to miss it during the webinar, and we will address it either throughout the conversation or at the very end where we have the Q&A scheduled. And that was pretty much it for the housekeeping. Without any further comments, it's my pleasure to invite on stage David. David, join me, please.
Hey, Sandra, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. Awesome. Well, good morning to you. I know that it's pretty early on the West Coast today.
Yeah, like we were saying, I agreed to do this before I knew I was going to be on the West Coast, so it's a little early, but it's okay. It's a good way to start the day.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this. It's our pleasure.
Of course.
And to get the conversation started, also the conversation with our audience, I have one question to our audience. Just please peek and send your emoji, either a camera or a video camera, if you already work with video, or if not yet, if you're just thinking about starting out. That will give us a good understanding of who we have in the audience and what's your level of experience and how things are going. So while our votes are coming in, David, since we already know that you are working with the video, I have a different question for you. What is the kind of current state of video at Aritzia, where you are now in your processes? How does it look?
Yeah, for sure. So, our current state is, I think, like many brands, how are we trying to figure out this whole video thing? How are we going to scale? Over the past few seasons, the past couple of years at Aritzia, we've really felt the increased demand for video content across all of our channels, really. So not just e-com, which we'll spend a lot of time talking about today, but campaign, social, internal, and corporate communication has been a huge increase for our video requests, from training videos to C-level videos, all of that stuff. So just across the board, video has become a huge player in what we produce for creative at Aritzia. And we were already starting to do it. We have very talented people and that can just jump in and do things. But as we started to do that, it started to take away from our bread and butter, what really keeps the lights on, right? So everybody wanted all this video content. So how do we continue to deliver world-class, best-in-class video content that Aritzia is expecting while still delivering everything that we know we already need? So we really looked at it in three ways: people, space, and technology. And we wanted to look at it holistically and attack it from those three angles to make sure we were supporting not only this new fun thing in video that everybody wants, but also still supporting the business and what we know, like we said earlier, keeps the lights on. So that's kind of our current state. We're going through a lot of that right now. We're producing a lot of content. We're producing a lot of video content. But how do we want to scale that? How do we want to ensure that we're still producing what we know we need to produce while thinking about this new production type?
Yeah, and I'm very glad that we have you here with us today to talk about the pains, the growing pains of scaling something like that. But just circling back to the beginning of it, when you started having that demand for more video content, what were the things that, looking back now, it's really important to prioritize and really focus above anything else?
Yeah, so it's easy to get caught up in all these requests, right? We need all these things to keep the brand going, to keep up with our competitors, but it's crucial to remind everybody of what we're producing currently and why our team is the size it is, why we have the skills that we've hired for, because it's really based around what we're currently tasked with producing. So anytime there's a new production type like video, to external partners, it may just seem cross-functional partners. It may just seem okay. Well, they produce all this content for us, so they can produce this too. Which they're not wrong in assuming that because that's what we're here to do. But when we're talking about video, it is quite different. So we want to make sure that we're not sacrificing what we're currently doing with this new production type. So we kind of took a step back and really worked closely with our cross-functional partners to identify what is most important. If we do this new production type, can we do less of this other production type? And once you task them with that and having to make sacrifices, or talking about their current business potentially getting less attention with how it's currently being supported, that's when you really start to have collaborative conversations, and it really goes a long way. So, our current team is based on this production volume for these production types. If you want this new production type, you may have to give up something to get it if you want it this week, this month. And then once you get your cross-functional partners on your side, it's really easy to go to the next phase in the process, whether that's finance or whether it's your leadership team, and say, hey, this team is asking for this. And they're now on our side because we're saying we can't deliver on what they have because they want this. So we now need what we were just talking about, people, space, and tech. We now need potentially a new person to come in and do this, or we need a new technology to come and do this, or we don't have enough space to do it, or maybe it's for all three, depending on how big the initiative is. So that's what I would say. Firstly, remind everybody where we are without losing track and without compromising what we're currently doing before we dive into something as important as video.
Yeah, and I definitely love your tip about painting that whole picture, that if we do this, we have to downgrade or sacrifice certain areas because it is impossible to have everything done with exact same resources. I think it's something that is very relatable to many, regardless of the area of their work. Yeah, something to definitely keep in mind when facing such situation. And also, I'd love to touch upon more about this whole people space and technology. So if we go into more of the details of the state that where you currently are, and if we can start with technology, because I know this is definitely something that many will be anticipating, just to learn how things are set up for you and what is happening at your studio. And I know we also have some nice templates prepared for you to share and showcase. So just let me know when to share them.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to pull those up now, we can talk high level about it and then get into a little bit more detail. So
Absolutely. And just also for everyone watching us, these are pretty small when we are looking at them this way, but you can also find them under the docs section on the top. And this one is called Current Videography Process Flow. So you can open it up in a separate tab and actually zoom in while David is talking through that.
yeah, and we'll talk more specifically about what we're looking at here in a second, but just to kind of lead us up to that point. So, I think when we were just talking about collaborating with your cross-functional partners, those who are actually giving you those requests, it's super important to align with them to understand what we were just talking about. If you want X, you might have to sacrifice on Y, or if you need both at the same rate, what do we want to do about it? And that's what really leads us to the visual we're looking at now. So there's no right or wrong answer to that, right? There's no like, okay, I'm not going to do video so you can keep producing what we currently have, or only do video and do this. There's no yes or no answers, no right or wrong answer. The thing there is to align with them to really understand what exactly it is that they need and how much they need of it. And so that will lead to what we're looking at now. And at Aritzia, the answer was kind of both, right? And that's usually what you'll get. Well, we want everything, right? So then if that's the case, and that's totally an acceptable answer, us as creative operations, then we would be tasked with, okay, if they want everything, what does that look like? What does everything mean? So what we're looking at on the screen now is a current state workflow of video as it relates to our e-com video process. I know we talked a little bit about campaign and social and internal and all of the other video needs that we have, and maybe that can be a conversation for another time, or we'll touch on it a little bit later. But this one's focusing on our video as it relates to e-com. Each individual box may not be so important for this conversation because I think every situation will be slightly different. So I wouldn't get too caught up in, okay, they're using this camera at this time and then it's going to here. So I think the idea here of showing this chart is that it's a great way to show your pieces of the puzzle while showing what technology that you're looping in. So on the left side, you'll see the technology that we're currently using, and then across the top, you'll see the steps of the process. So and then throughout, you'll see the pieces of the process. So that's what this is showing. So our current state here, and that really helps us understand, okay, here's what we're currently using, here's the process, and then here's the people or teams and where they plug into the process and what they're using. So everyone is on the same page. I think it's super important to ground everyone in current state because people have a different idea of what current state is. Some people, we did a video test a few months ago, so someone on the third floor of your business saw that and okay, we're well underway for production and video, right? Which may not be the case. That may have been a very ad hoc thing where we rented one camera, brought in one, DP to do it, and then this is what we could potentially do. But if that gets in the wrong hands, Aritzia is off and running and doing high-level video production, right? So that's not the case. I think it's super important to ground everyone with where we are, not only from a process point of view, which is what we're looking at now, but this will also show from a people point of view. And then what this shows a little bit as well is from a technology and hardware point of view too. So I think when we speak about technology, we're not only speaking about the software that we're using, but we're also talking about the physical cameras we're using, the physical cards we're using, the physical card readers we're using. So all of that goes into play of this large-scale video production. So that's what this visual here is showing, is just the attempt at showing our current state technology, our current state steps in the process. And then once everybody is aligned to this, you can then work on your next level, right? Where do you want to be, the next step.
Yeah. And speaking of that, I know when we were preparing for this webinar, you showed me some of the documents that were, I personally think, amazing at, as you said, kind of grounding everybody and ensuring that everybody fully understands where we are right now and where we want to go. And so this actually brings me to our next part about building the business case and creating the business case for scaling what you have achieved. So if you could walk us maybe a little bit through your process of how you approach things on that front. And I know that we have one more great template to showcase to our audience when it comes to that transition.
Yeah. Feel free to share that too while we're talking through. So, like you said, how do you make the business case? So, like we were talking about earlier, again, it's spending a lot of time with your cross-functional partners and those who are really requesting that work from your creative team. So, for us, we did like most people would do. We did some video tests a couple seasons back to just make sure we could physically produce the content. But that's really just the start, right? There's so many other things that you need to think about before you can check something off and move forward with it, especially at large scale video production. So for us, collaborating with our cross-functional partners, really understanding, okay, yes, we know you're asking for this specific production type, but let's get a little bit more specific. Which types of videos are resonating with our audience? It's great to have all of that external information. Hey, this competitor is producing this type of content, so we should do it too. I think that's a piece of the puzzle, but for us, it's really about understanding exactly what works for Aritzia. So when we did our video test, we produced some sample videos. We had them test the site, so working with IT to test the site to make sure they could handle the video. And then we worked with our ecom team to make sure that video was resonating with the audience. And so there were some good findings there. We did find that the same colorway on the same model helped conversion, where we found a negative impact when it was different. So that helped direct us in our strategy. So, at Aritzia, we have 2 studios in 2 different locations in North America. So originally going in, that told us, okay, well, we have 2 studios. We could maybe capture video content in one and the stills in the other, or vice versa. But that wasn't the case after we saw the actual metrics and the data of what was helping conversion. So we knew we had to do this production type with the other production type at the same time. So, again, that kind of goes back to my main point of collaborating with your cross-functional partners, probably even more than you want to. And that's really one of the hardest parts. But after we got those metrics, after we had a lot of alignment and knew which direction to go, it was, time to put together what we're calling here, a light business case, right? And I think we've touched on a lot of this stuff so far, but just to run through the bullet points on this slide, and really create that one pager where you can take to leadership, you can take to finance, those who don't necessarily speak the same creative language that we might on this call. So just starting from the top, the introduction overview, again, just grounding people into what's going on, what this whole initiative is about. Current state, again, grounding everyone in that current state. This is where we currently are. Yes, you may have seen a final video on the website, but that was one video that we worked on for weeks because we didn't have the internal teams, we didn't have the internal tools, we didn't have everything in place. So it might look good now, but it was quite a nightmare to get to that one video. So just reminding people we're not quite ready to put your foot on the gas yet. Future state. So once everybody's aligned to what this project's about, where we are, where do we want to be? So this is really where you want to push it. Go as far as you want. Like, don't limit yourself. Something I'm always concerned about coming from the production side is budget, right? So sometimes I let that limit my blue sky thinking, and this isn't the time to do that. You should really go for it here in your future state. Whether it's go as far as AI or something that may not be realistic, but at least you have that North Star that's carrying you forward, and then there's probably somewhere in between that you'll land. But this is really where you want to be, future state, and maybe even show more than one. It's okay to have future state A, future state B. These are options, and the pros and cons of those. So, but really show you're pushing the boundaries here in the future state. I think that goes a long way with cross-functional partners, and then you can kind of dial it back in. But we're going to go with C because of it makes the most sense. But it's good to show your thought processes out there within reason. How to get there. So this is something we mentioned too. So tech, space, people. What tech and hardware do you need? So this is where you actually list out what your future state could be. Whether that's we want to bring in Pixels as a post-production vendor because of their industry leading, and so that's where we're plugging them into one of the steps. So we want to bring in for us a tool like Creative Force was our photo workflow. So that's from our capture to our post-production workflow tool, and then space. So do you physically have enough space to do this type of production? Is it the right space? Again, when you're not in our sector, a lot of people would just look in and say, oh, you have a photography bay over there, just do the video right there. And we all know that may or may not be the best outcome if you're compromising space or try to leverage equipment that wasn't specifically made for that production type. So for us, space is something we're currently working through. We're working on a larger, longer term studio to support this production type among other things. So, and space has limited our ability to get this done at scale in recent months, and it's a problem for us. So it's something we're working through. People, do you have not only enough people? I think a lot of times we talk about bandwidth. Do we have enough people? But when you're in creative, you have to have not only enough bodies, but you have to have the right skill. Apologies, there's a trash can going through. Do you have the right skilled people to do this? And as you bring in new production types, it's not always as easy as just leveraging someone else that's on the team for it, depending on what it is, of course. But I think when this specific conversation is based around video, and you need the right people to do that. You need skilled people to do that. So yes, bandwidth is a big part of it, but do you have the right skills? So talk about how many people you need, what types of skills you need to bring in. And then you get into financials. So after you kind of lay out your roadmap, which we'll look at the future state roadmap of the process in a second, what new tech do you want to bring in? How much does it cost? How much space do you need? What would that look like? What would expansion look like? What people do you need to bring in? What would that look like? What are industry standard rates for those people, whether it's freelancer, bringing in a full-timer? And it doesn't always have to be more, right? I think most of the time, and in this conversation, it's helpful to talk about more. But you may not need all three. You may need one. You may need nothing. It really depends on your volume and where the business wants to go. So don't always think you need more. You may need more later, and it may be something like a more future-looking thing. If video picks up, then we could do something like this. So, but start those conversations early. Make sure people are engaged and knowing that this could potentially lead to something else, and we're already looking into it. And then considerations. We talked a little bit about this earlier. What are other brands doing? What external information's out there? How are they approaching this? Rely on past coworkers or past experience. Like I said, I think I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of tools out there. There's a lot of technology out there. There's a lot of ways to do the same thing. So lean on your past experience too, past lives, other brands. There's plenty of technology that I was, legacy tech or tech that we were using and at other brands that I don't want to use anymore. So I know not to bring that in, right? Where there may be new things I don't even know about. So give yourself some time to do that research and reach out to industry, attend events, go to conferences like Flow and see what's happening, listen to people. Talk about it. And that's really where I've learned the most, is listening to how other people have approached a similar situation. Not everything might not apply, but if there's one thing I can pull from, it's totally worth it. And then I'll wrap up with this. Just make sure you have an exit strategy too. I think it's not super important when talking about that to their creatives who are all ready to produce this content. But when you talk about it with the business, it's important to show that you've thought about this, and that'll go a long way. It'll make them at ease. Okay, we need to spend X amount of money, but you've already thought about a way to potentially get 80% of that back, right? So that could consist of hiring well-rounded enough individuals that can be repurposed for other production types if this new one doesn't work out, or if you bought a bunch of video camera equipment, can you sell it? Or maybe you start out renting, so you're not investing in buying it right away. I think just showing that you've thought through it that way will put those who ultimately hold the funds at ease, and then give you the funds faster.
Yeah. Well, this has been immensely helpful, and tons of information about building up that case and really preparing yourself properly, not just building the case so that you actually get the funds and get the green light, but also like thinking it through in very step-by-step way. And I love the exit strategy in particular, because that I think we all, each in our own kind of area, have faced when you got the funds, you did that, but then it turns out that it's just not working. But what do you do? How do you pivot basically and do it relatively fast? So preparing yourself for that is super helpful, and very good tip to remember. And of course, a good tip to remember to join Flow, which is happening next month in LA. And both David and myself will be there. Hopefully, some of our viewers also will be joining us. Well, that's been very, very interesting. Actually, one more question I had around that. This blue sky ideal situation, how far in the future do you go with it?
That's a good question. So you really want to build this specific case. If you're ready to do video production, you want to build that future state to something that's achievable for, whatever you've aligned on with the business, whether that's this season or next season. So you do want to have an achievable thing in there. I know I was saying like push it, because that's what's fun to me, is finding that like maybe not realistic future state, because then I can dial it back and find something that's there. But I think it's always hard for me to, say we should limit ourselves to this, because that's not what's fun when we're working. For me, I like to push the boundaries as far as possible. But so I think for the document, maybe to answer your question, the document might be something that's a little bit more realistic, but have that high level blue sky in your back pocket. That's as far out as it can go, just to show that you have thought through, and this where we're landing is right because of X, Y, and Z. So I think a lot of times when I have conversations with leadership, they're always like, this makes a lot of sense, but what else is out there? Have you considered other things? Have you done enough analysis? Have you looked at multiple companies? So that's what I mean by pushing it, to make sure that you've done all of that, because it's ultimately they're going to ask for it. So yeah, we've looked at an automated video bay, and it's so cool, and it's it does all these things, but it also costs X. So we've decided to pare it back because we're not 100% invested in this production type yet. Maybe 2 seasons from now, if this is the newest, pushing our brand above and beyond everything, we can revisit that. But you're right. So you want to have something achievable that, we're hearing that the volume is going to be this from the brand. So this is where we want to be to accomplish that. And then, if that continues to grow, have those other layers in there of higher level thinking.
Yeah, 100%. And that's so true. I've, definitely in a different industry, but I've experienced that myself as well. You kind of need to think with ambition about whatever project you are presenting, and think 3-5 years ahead. And what if you had unlimited funds? Because then you are so much better prepared for any questions, and you have the arguments for why you're doing it this way, and not right away jumping on maybe a level that is just unattainable right now. That's not realistic because of this and that and that. Yeah. And that builds that trust between sure. leadership and yourself. Yeah. And then they know you know what you're doing. We can trust you to get that process to where we need it to be.
Yeah. The main thing there is just showing that thought process, that you've thought about all the things.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. Great. And I know that time is just flying by, and we also started getting some great questions in the Q&A, but I definitely wanted to touch upon that future state where you want to take your studio over this year, or maybe your blue sky is much farther away.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think we have a slide there as well, but we'll just quickly talk through that. Like you said, I know we're running out of time. There's a couple more things we want to get to. But similar to what we were looking at before. So, the previous version of this was current state, right? So then all the things that we've talked about so far, you want to take it to that next level. Where do you want it to be to achieve the request volume that is coming in for this production type? And again, the important thing here isn't so much each individual detailed box, but putting the process and technology and people in a place that all lines up. So from the original box, or the original chart we were looking at, was shooting it in camera, taking it off the cards, putting it on a computer, putting it into software, editing, putting it into publishing software. So a lot of that still applies here, but how we're getting from A to B is a little different. So what we've tried to do is bring in some technology that allows us to automate some of that process. So when we are doing all of this, scaling we've been talking about, it's possible, it's efficient. So that's the idea here. That's where we really wanted to go, is with this process is, yes, we needed to hire a little bit. We needed some new skills, so we needed to do that. We needed more space, which we've talked about. And then what this is really showing is the technology piece. What do we need to bring in to ensure we can produce a certain amount of volume that the brand is requesting? So then this is built upon all the things we've been talking about, relying on our internal experts. Okay, you're part of this process here. What tools do you need to do your process, to do your part of the process efficiently? Do you have that? Is there something we should be looking at? So it's always a combination of things. There's never one perfect answer. It's never always yes, more. In this case, so some stuff stayed the same and some stuff was new. So across the left side, you'll see the new tech that we kind of folded into the process if you were to compare both of these charts side by side, and then what that is accomplishing. So that's the main goal here. Again, I don't think it's important to write down every single word in every single one of these boxes, but the idea of putting a process together in a chart like this will really help you understand where you were and where you want to be and how everything plays into each other.
Right. And that probably helps a lot to understand if you were thinking or someone was pitching it to bring in a technology, but then when you look at the chart, you understand that this technology is used only for one step. And
Yep.
maybe it can be much smarter and more efficient for the full production to find an alternative that can be plugged in across more stages and in different areas. And it will just be like the ROI of your investment will be stronger.
Exactly. Yep. And you may need tech for one part of the process, or you may have technology that can do multiple parts of the process. So this really helps you understand how they connect and where you want to make that sacrifice or not. I think a lot of tools kind of overlap in some areas. So where do you find that line?
Yeah, that's for sure. And as I've mentioned before, all of this 3 slides that we have shown, they are located under the documents, and you can actually download them and study on Zoom so that you can see more details that have been written in here. And before we turn into the Q&A, my very last question, and maybe like quick advice, David, from you.
For sure.
What are the things to avoid and really to keep in mind when scaling video production from your experience?
Yeah, for sure. There's a ton. But I know we'll keep it to a couple. So one of the main things is, we've been talking a lot about collaborating with our cross-functional partners. When you're producing this content, make sure that it can be delivered. I think that's something that we all forget about. Okay, do we have the space? Do we have the tech? Can we produce this content? Are we building this world-class, best-in-class team to produce this content for the brand? But ultimately, with something like video, with the heavier weight files, with, a newer production type like this, can it get to your customer and how you envision it? I think that's something that a lot of times we'll forget about. So for us, our site couldn't quite handle the videos that we were originally producing. So if it can't get to the customer, what's the point, right? Is it just sitting on your jam, taking up space at that point? So just make sure you're aligned to that part of the process too. So if the C-level is asking for 8K because they heard that's the best thing out there, but your site can't support anything more than a few kilobytes, then there's a huge disconnect there, and there's no point to bring in people's space or tech. So work closely with your cross-functional partners, especially IT, to say, okay, we're going to be producing a terabyte of videos per month going up on the site. Can the site handle that? Will that impact performance? So make sure to test that too. That's super important, or you shouldn't even start everything we talked about. And then don't be afraid to speak up. We talked about this too. If a new production type or even just an additional increase to current production types is going to cause issues with workflow and people and quality, speak up immediately. Say, if we have to do 10% more of this, we're going to have to give up this. Or if we need to do this now, we got to give up this. So make sure you're raising those flags and having the conversation as early as possible before it just like tumbles downstream, and then creatives just constantly trying to tread water and keep up with the demand. So those are just a couple of the top ones.
All the great ones for sure, and definitely about speaking up, because I believe nobody will be kind of offended or look strange at you if you raise it in advance. But the issues that are going to happen if you take more than is possible to manage, that will be much more kind of detrimental for the business, and more people, more teams will suffer.
Yes, for sure.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. I know we are already over time, but this conversation has been going really so well that now we're going to dive into the Q&A. We have a few really good questions, and some of them have been upvoted by many. So the first one is from Pianos. How do you ensure consistency between photos and videos if you're moving between flash photos and continuous lighting for video?
Yeah, and so, I should have brought some of my more technical experts on the call, but for that, our process, our approach right now is going to be doing it in 2 different days. So we're going to have a stills bay and a video bay, and we'll have a circuit. So that's going to be that's part of our physical space requirements. I know that doesn't really show up on the flow that we were showing, so it's more technology based, but that's our approach for now.
Yeah. Great. And yeah, for more technical questions, I guess.
Yeah, I might have to say I don't know, and I'll get back to you. But I think that answers that from a high level.
Yeah, but I guess we can message you on LinkedIn, and then you'll
Yeah,
put
for
us in
sure.
touch
Absolutely.
with someone who is highly
totally.
technical in your team. Just a tip for everybody who wants to learn more: connect with David on LinkedIn and ask questions. David has been extremely responsive and generous with sharing the insights and learnings. And one more question from Marina. How do you deal with post-production? Is it externalized? Is it an issue? The color match? Do you use continuous light to ensure coherence between photo and video?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's something we're still working through, so I don't have a great, perfect answer for it. But with the small scale that we started out with, we started out internal. And our teams are, our stills post-production team and those who are working on video, we're just working closely together on such a small volume that was okay. But for part of our scale, we will send it externally. And we haven't done that at scale yet. We're actually still testing doing it external, preparing for our volume increase. So it's something we're gonna have to figure out together. But yeah, it's something we're thinking about, and I wish I had a better answer for that. But maybe in 6 months' time, I will have a better answer for that, or sooner, hopefully. But yeah, it's a good question and something that we're keeping an eye on and trying to plan for.
Well, this definitely calls for a follow-up webinar or virtual roundtable where we ask you once again all of these questions and see how your answers will change.
Yeah, and one of the things we should have said at the beginning is, we're working through a lot of this too, and I think we mentioned it, but yeah, if you have any answers to any of my questions, please let me know too. I'm happy to talk about this after this call.
It's a never-ending learning process, I believe. And once you feel like you know it all, something happens, you understand that there is still that much that you don't. Yes, 100%. And yeah, a question about something that has really caught attention, I think, for many and for me as well. Did you mention before that customers stick more to video when the color isn't different from the photos?
Yeah, I'll clarify that a little bit. So for us, one of the things we noticed from our testing was the same colorway on the PDP page, right? So if it's a green top, our A shot is the green top, our B shot is the green top back, and then our C shot is the video shot. So making sure that that's the same item in the same color, and then it goes into our D shot and A, B, C, D, E shot, F shot. So just making sure it's merged the same was a plus for us for a conversion with the same item, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I find like findings like that and data points like that are so interesting and so important, and really like small details, but help you define a lot in your process for sure.
Yeah, and that may be specific to us too. So make sure you're doing your own testing, as that might not be universal, but it's something that we found and we wanted to try to work into our process.
And just following up on that question, how did you kind of determine that? Were you working with the commerce team to find this metric? So how did it work?
Yeah, we were working with our ecom team to pull that insight. So we produced the test assets that they wanted, provided them the test assets, and then they set parameters around how long the test would be, what they're trying to get from it, and then they provided that information back to us. So then that helped us direct our longer term strategy.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like that's another huge topic that we could talk about, how to work with your ecom team to make all those tests and find important data points for you.
Yeah, and use that to your advantage as producers and creative ops. If you feel you don't have the right information, for us, I knew we weren't ready to produce video at scale, so I had to delay, and they didn't have the information, so I used it against them. So don't be afraid to do that too, but in a collaborative way.
They're very smart. Great tips all around here. We have one more question here. Can the same people handle video from a skill perspective?
And by same, I'm assuming you just mean maybe current creative staff or something like that. So it just depends. And that's something that you have to talk to your team about. One, you'll get a lot of different answers. You'll get people who don't have the skill but want to learn, which is always good. That may not help you if you need to scale tomorrow. But it's good to know as you start to build that team out, you'll get people who have the skill but maybe doing something else, so you can repurpose them and maybe backfill their position if it's an easier position to find. And then you may just not have the skills or not have enough of the skills to produce it at the level that your brand is accustomed to. So I think there's a lot of different answers there. And like we were saying earlier, it's just about having a lot of conversations with your internal creative team, and seeing what they feel comfortable doing. For me, I'm not the expert, right? I can't produce that on my own, or I shouldn't. I mean, no one's going to be happy with it. So I have a lot of conversations with my internal team. At Aritzia, we're lucky to have a really big and skilled team. But even us, we had to hire for this production type because we didn't have enough of that skill to produce at scale. We had people who could step in, but again, like we were talking about earlier, it compromised other parts of our creative business.
Yeah, so true. And there is no universal answer, I guess, for that, because it's really so individual from team to team, from each person. Great. And the very last question for us today is, do you foresee a single video with camera movements replacing a series of stills soon?
Yeah, that's right. You put that into your blue sky, right? Soon, we can talk offline about what we think soon will be. I don't think soon. I do think in the future, though. Yes.
And the future is?
Yeah,
How
right.
far is the future?
The future is always in the future is what, 10 seconds from now. It's 10 minutes from now. Yeah, no. And I hate I said this like a million times, so it's, but it does depend on what your brand, how you're trying to visually represent your brand. So you could do that now, right? You could grab stills from a video right now. It just depends on your art direction and what would get approved and what you're trying to achieve. So I should say, yes, that's possible now, but it depends on your brand and how they want their content to be viewed on their site, or wherever. For us, it's not in the cards in the near future, but you can technically do that now.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you so much, David, for sharing so much about your processes, about your learnings, and answering all the questions. I'm sure that everybody in the audience really appreciates it. I know I really appreciate it. And I'm really looking forward to meeting you in less than a month, on February 23rd in LA. So if anyone is kind of willing to make a trip to LA, we will be really happy to see you there, talk more about video and all of the other topics. And if not, then we will probably see you at some other webinars. We will have a lot of them this year, every month. Our next one will be on February 15th. So stay tuned for more information. David, thank you so much. Have a great day and productive trip to the West Coast.
Yeah, already underway. And I know this was only 30 minutes and a very high level, but if there's any other questions or anything that you want to share with me, like I said, we're going through this now, please reach out on LinkedIn, or you can get my information from Alexandra. So looking forward to continuing the conversation, and hopefully see some people at Flow.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.